everybody. Welcome to Radio Dead Air Tech Q&A. You've got questions. We've got guesses. I'm Nash. I've been doing Tech Q&A. I've been doing Radio Dead Air for ages, but in addition to that, I'm also an IT professional. With me, as always, my producer, Mike Gearman, also works in IT. If you have a tech question for us, send it to requests@radiodeadair.com, or you can fire that off to our comments on the YouTube. We will check both. Let's see. So, how you doing, Mike?
Not too bad. I mean, today was the first day this year that it hit 80 degrees here. So I was a little grumpy until the sun went over there. And now it's 75 in my room. And I'm like, oh, this is much nicer.
I've been... I'll have to cut together the video and put it else together. I've been working on rebuilding my media server, which people are like, can you build a computer on the stream? I'm like, yeah, I did. So we'll mess with that. Just to explain what I was doing, in case anyone was actually curious. My media server, it was kind of a hand-me-down leftovers system. I had a Ryzen 5 3600 leftover from Sarah's machine. We moved her to a used 5700X a while back, so she's got an ace core. She's got a much better CPU. We had the 3600 sitting around. I had some extra DDR4 from my old
She do.
Yeah, I had it from my old Threadripper system. And I got an A520 motherboard for like $60, which is a terrible motherboard, by the way. It has 2 RAM slots, no VRM heat sinks or anything, because it is not intended to do any overclocking. It is crap as shit. It will run, is what it does. You turn it on, it works. Yeah, I do not advise anyone for any serious computing purpose to get any of the AMD A series motherboards. Always get a B series or an X series. Do not get the A series boards. Those are bad.
I might use an A series board as a controller for something, but that would be only if it was a single purpose.
And since it was a media server, I needed something to transcode video with. And since the AM4 Ryzen CPUs, as a rule, didn't have their own built-in graphics, I grabbed the only real capable card I had around that could do it, which is a GTX 1080, which is a little overkill for the application.
For a media server, it's not much overkill, but it's a little overkill.
It's also water cooled from the factory. It's got an all-in-one liquid cooler built in, so it worked, and it worked fairly well. And having
but it was a higher maintenance thing than you needed it to be.
Well, not just that. It number one, it didn't have AV1, which is, that's newer. And for another, the Ryzen 5 3600 is a 65 watt part. The GTX 1080 is a 180 watt part. It wasn't running full wattage at all times, but when it did run high wattage, it didn't need to, and it idled pretty high too. So it's a little bit older. It wasn't perfectly suited for the task, and it ran high power. So what I did was I found a used i5 1600T. Now, Intel has a fun relationship with labeling their CPUs. They're unlocked. The basic CPU is just the number. So let's say if this was the regular one, it'd be the 12600, i5 12600. If it were the unlocked part, they would use the letter K. K stands for unlocked.
Unlocked. Yeah, this was filed under J for toy.
If it were the model that did not have an integrated GPU, then it would be the i600F, which stands for no graphics. If it were the low-powered mobile part, it would be the the 12600U. And since it's a low-powered desktop part,
okay, I can see that because U stands for underpowered.
Well, the low power desktop part, it's the 12600T. Now, if this weren't an American company, if this were like something like Germany or something like, oh, that's just, I guess they're going by the German words or the Swedish words. No. This is an American company. They just can't spell. So
it's the kind of thing where if I ever got the chance, I would ask them what the logic was.
They probably don't even know at this point. The 12600T it runs at 35 watts. So it is a low power part. Now, technically, you can take any of the Intel CPUs, and unlike the AMD CPUs, if you try to run them too low a wattage, they just won't work. The Intel CPUs, the 12th gen, 13th gen, you can clock them all the way down to a certain level. 35 watts is acceptable. It's just, it'll have a headroom. This one's already stuck at 35. It can't go any higher, but that's fine. I don't want it to go any higher. And not only that, the integrated GPUs that Intel uses, the built-in ones that are built into the CPU, have something called QuickSync. So effectively, that one CPU at 35 watts is doing the same amount of work as the 65 watt Ryzen 5 3600 and the 180 watt GeForce GTX 1080. All in one little chip. And for a motherboard, I got a used, I don't even know if it's used, it was a pull from an Asus gaming system. The motherboard is it's G15CF, which I looked it up. It's the same thing as an Asus TUF Gaming B660M, except they did not use, it has no RGB headers. They didn't put those on there. It doesn't have an RGB chip. And it doesn't have a header for USB-C on the front. Otherwise, it's the exact same motherboard with the exact same functions.
And neither of those are things you needed for a media server. Nope.
So, I mean, it's not unlocked because it's not an overclocking board, but then again, it's not an overclocking CPU. It's got a lot of USB ports, which is very nice. It's got built-in Wi-Fi 6, very nice. Very beefy VRMs for cooling the voltage. Don't really need it, but it's nice. It's a nice to have. So yeah, this is a nice little motherboard. I got the CPU was 80 and the motherboard was 80. So it was a very good deal. Now, if I tried to get like a regular i5 12600K or even a 13600 or something like that, that would have gone up to like 160, 170 bucks. The 12600T isn't even a retail part. Intel doesn't sell those low powered ones in stores. You can't go and buy one in a box. It came out of a system. Someone upgraded it themselves. They didn't want it anymore. So it ended up with an electronics reseller, and that's where it went. So now, yeah, I've got the parts in. Now the next part is I have to migrate my M.2 drive here, which is in this giant oversized thermal right cooler for the M.2. Big heatsink on this sucker because, yes. The reason it has that is because the other motherboard had no heatsink. So, whoops. Had to have something. I reused the same thermal right cooler, which is nice. I am also moving my backup drive into here as well, and I'm going to configure it as a NAS. So I'm going to have network attached storage from now on instead of having the little external hard drive caddy. Now I'm going to have network attached storage, and I can access it across our LAN. The only thing it should be Ethernet connection. I should run a Cat 5, Cat 6 connection or something. We don't have a Cat 6 connection there. I use it on Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi 6 has been very good. It hasn't had any connection issues. It's run fairly well. If it's a server, you're supposed to hardwire it. But I don't feel like drilling holes in the wall and going into nasty, dirty crawl space under my house to run a 50, 75 foot Ethernet cable fuck it, I'll just use the Wi-Fi. It's fine.
And it's not like you can train the Porsche cats, who seem to like it under the house occasionally, to run the cable for you.
No. What they do like to do is they like to drag dead things under there, which is they found a tired possum down there. I don't know what the fuck. Anyway. All right, that's the stuff I've been doing. Let's get to the news. This is actually kind of all right. There has always been a line when it comes to companies trying to protect, trying to do digital rights management, trying to protect their the rights they hold. Yeah. There's been a definitive line. They will put nag screens on your system. They will potentially disable software, but they will never make your system unusable. They will never make your hardware. They will never block your hardware from being functional.
Who was the company that put their anti-malware, anti-copying stuff? They put it into your boot.
But that's not hardware, though.
But I want to say it did brick a few people.
I mean, yeah, you could just pull the shit out of there. They did not. They drew the line at never going into the firmware of your system and disabling your system. Until now. And wouldn't you know it, it's Nintendo. Nintendo has changed their terms of service
and to reserve dramatically between US, UK, and EU, it looks like.
Yeah. They reserve the right now, according to their they reserve the right to brick your system, essentially. They reserve the right to if they find you have been violating if you pirating, it's violating copyright, but they like to use the term pirating. If you've been violating copyright with your stuff, the U.S. terms of service states you acknowledge if you fail to comply with the foregoing restrictions, Nintendo may render the Nintendo account services and or the Nintendo device permanently unusable in whole or in part.
Yeah, I mean, when you first sent me this story, I'm reading this over and going, is this a piracy thing? What is going on here? And part of me was wondering, like, okay, the way some of this is worded, can they brick you for streaming? And they could. It's because it says
potentially.
Publish. And does stream count as publishing? I don't know. It feels like this is overkill for the effect, for the results they're looking for. What they're trying to do feels like it's an overreaction.
Now, this also brings into question emulation. And there are things it is perfectly legal, 100%, to emulate on a video. And so if you use your Nintendo Switch with an emulator application, if that's possible, hi Charlie, you want to help? Charlie wants to help. If you use your system like that, Nintendo reserves the right, if they consider that a violation of your services agreement, they can, or fail to comply with the foregoing restrictions, they can disable your Nintendo Switch. This is cray-cray. This has been a bright red line you do not cross.
Yeah, now it's interesting that they're only doing that in the US. The UK doesn't have that section. They say, hey, if you decompile, reverse engineer this digital product, by which they mean a game, for piracy, for hacks, for cheats, They say, we can take that digital game away from you. And okay, fair. Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Ish. Certainly more reasonable than bricking the hardware, but they don't go. So I'm wondering what the UK law, there must be a UK law that says you can't brick people's hardware like that.
Probably. UK
that the
and
US
the EU
does not have.
The UK and the EU, even outside, even now the UK has left the EU. Over there, they tend to be like very consumer on the side of the consumer and customers, because companies need limits. But America, current administration has made it quite clear, do whatever you want. So this is going to, I'm pretty sure we're not going to see the FCC or the FTC step in aggressively to protect customer rights on this issue. This might fall to the state. Someone in the channel said this might violate California law. We'll have to see what happens there. Nintendo is a company that is famous for being petty little shits at every freaking turn. And if you've ever tried to make any video about, even just say the word Nintendo on YouTube, it's like nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. They will be right up your ass immediately. This doesn't entirely surprise me. It feels like they're trying to see what they can get away with. And I don't think this is going to become an issue until they try to enforce it. They may not try to enforce it. They may feel like there's too much of a backlash and just be like, oh, look over there, and just not do it. But this is it's concerning.
I would see them absolutely doing we're going to take the game away from you that you hacked.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. And that's been a long time. It's been long standing. We reserve the right. You can't use this software anymore. We can do that. I mean, it's not always great, but that has been something with digital software delivery that we have, come to accept, whether we like it or not.
And in theory, if they have a reasonable appeals process, it might work out okay.
Now, what's concerning here is just last week, we saw Microsoft and the Xbox increase their prices. More particularly, we saw they increase their game prices to $80. And the main reason they're trying this is because Nintendo did it first. So there's a good chance that other manufacturers will see what Nintendo can get away with and be like, well, if Nintendo got away with it, why can't we? So we don't know if this, we don't know, but this is nasty. This is absolutely nasty. And it's only in America. If you're in the rest of the world, you're fine. If it's in America, you're kicked around. I hate it here. All right. Next is the RTX 5060, not the 5060 Ti, the 5060. You may remember we talked about the 5060 Ti, the 8GB version, and how NVIDIA was reluctant to allow reviewers to have it.
Yeah.
Well, with the 5060, which only has an 8GB version, it's less
really reluctant.
They are not going to be day one reviews for the 5060
because no one has drivers.
Yeah, everyone has the hardware. Hardware Unboxed, Igor's Lab, I'm pretty sure, Jay's 2 Cents and Gamers Next, I'm pretty sure they all have a 5060 on hand. But without drivers from NVIDIA that add the 5060 to the driver stack, to the unified drivers, the card is useless. It'll probably boot up into Windows under the base, basic VGA driver. That's it.
It won't have anything special in there to actually make it run games at a reviewable level.
Yeah, none of the NVIDIA stuff will be present. It will be a generic driver that probably won't even be able to game. So they cannot do day one reviews. What this means is that when the 5060 goes on sale, there will be no reviews for it. None. Because NVIDIA does not want this thing to get the bad word of mouth that it's very likely going to get.
Because well, one, the RAM is really minimal. I mean, they gave it a decent amount of CUDA cores. It's got the expected bandwidth that you would see in this level card. But 8 gig is just not really enough anymore.
And as we've seen with the 5060 Ti 8 gig, it struggled with a lot of games. It struggled with using DLSS and ray tracing. It struggled with PCIe 4.0 because it's a by 8 instead of a by 16 card. And to make matters worse, the drivers will be dropping at the same time reviewers around the world are gathering for Computex. They are actually leaving their production facilities and flying to Computex. So they could not have the reviews ready to go anyway. Like, if they stayed up all night and sat there and waited for the driver and they made a video as fast as they fucking could, doesn't matter because they'll be at Computex coverage. This is incredibly shitty.
Yeah. Now, we'll note again, as you pointed out, just the 5060 Ti used PCIe 5 times 8. So does this one. There was never a doubt in my mind. Yeah, there's never a doubt in my mind it was going to be PCIe 5 times 8.
But if you're using a 4x8, you're screwed.
Yeah, this is not this is not drop into your older computer as a good upgrade card.
The absolute aggression that NVIDIA is showing to not only reviewers but customers here is really remarkable. They're upset. They're upset that people don't like the products. They're upset that AMD seems competitive because people are really looking forward to the 9060 XT, and the 9060 XT is probably going to be an 8 gigabyte card itself too. But NVIDIA is just, they are just dicking people over on this, especially reviewers who a lot of them, they have supposedly have good working relationships with. Well, not this time. I don't think they were quite prepared for everybody to go 8 gigabytes is not enough RAM, even though they've been telling them since the 40 series and even the 30 series that 8 gigabytes is not enough RAM anymore. And then Intel undercut them with their entry-level card is 10 gigs. And AMD, there's probably going to be an 8 gig card, but probably the 9060 is maybe faster than the 5060. And they're reportedly, there's going to be an RTX 5050. How much more can you cut? How much more cut down can the damn card be?
Oh, hang on. What? Let me bring up the 5060 specs again because I had that on a screen.
Yeah.
Let me look at this. Let's see here. Well, obviously you can't cut memory because we already know 8 is not enough. You couldn't. I mean, I don't see where you could cut the bus interface. There's no PC. Well, I mean, you could cut it to PCIe 5 times 4, but only if you didn't want to sell any of them.
Mm-hmm.
You could bus width, drop it to GDDR6. I don't know.
I don't know, but this is NVIDIA, like, no, the 5060 technically already is a 5050. If you look at the size of the die, if you look at the number of CUDA cores, if you look at the history of the releases, it technically already is a 5050. This would be like a 5030, whatever else they released. And it's going to be a Garbo card, which is not going to be very competitive. Intel's going to have something soon. They're going to have a response soon, like in the next few months. If not, they'll keep tweaking the drivers on the Battle Mage already. And AMD has just been like coming in and like the enthusiasm for AMD this generation should tell NVIDIA something. And what it told NVIDIA is, don't let them review our shit. They won't buy it.
Well,
finally,
I mean,
one last.
I say, but with that, the enthusiasm for AMD, when they saw that, it was too late for them to change anything other than not releasing the drivers.
Yeah, pretty much. Excuse me. Well, one last one this week. This is sort of a fare thee well. Linux is an operating system that is classically known for running on anything. One of my favorite sayings is your grandmother can run Linux. You can install Linux on your granny. It'll be fun. So this is one of the rare instances where Linux is the developers are pretty much like, okay, let's be realistic here, people, please. They are dropping support for one of the oldest functioning CPUs that are still in existence. The 486 is no longer going to be supported by the Linux kernel.
Which is fair because the last one was rolled off the production line, 18 years ago.
I am surprised that recent, but then I realized something. Do you know who still needs 486s and 586s?
The military?
Possibly, but I was thinking NASA.
Well, let's just broaden our answers, both our answers, to government agencies in a whole who have dedicated systems that are really difficult to upgrade.
You know the Hubble runs on a 486?
Yeah, I did know that.
When the Hubble, a while, like this is in the 2000s, the computer inside the Hubble broke down, and they only had one replacement for it. It was a very customized motherboard and all. It was a 486, and the Hubble Space Telescope runs on a 486 processor. This is if you don't understand,
wanted to do that tech assist.
Yeah, if you don't understand what we mean by 486, because the naming nomenclature has changed over the years. 86 back then, and actually technically today, is x86 is the instruction set that the CPUs use to run programs. It is what runs desktop Windows. Linux can make use of it. Lots of can make use of x86. The first one officially was the 8086 processor. There was a 186, but it was incompatible with the 8086. Don't ask me why.
It didn't go anywhere. Then there was the 286, 386, 486. There was a 586, but I think 586 is after that when they changed the nomenclature.
No,
I don't remember.
Literally, there was 286, 386, 486 Pentium. The 586 was made by AMD and Cyrix. It was not an Intel product. Then there was a 686, which Intel did not make. They made those were drop-in replacements for Intel parts. But eventually they stopped using those numbers, and we went to Athlon. We went to Pentium 2, Pentium 3, Pentium 4. Then we went to the Pentium 4 series.
Now we got the number series that we all know and love and have to look up because we don't always remember what it means.
Yeah. So, but at the core, underneath them all, even today, even Intel's most recent CPUs, the Core Plus, whatever they're called, and even AMD's Ryzen 9000 series, they are still running the x86 instruction set, just much faster, with lots of additional stuff stacked on. Oh, yeah, lots of stuff.
And so the reason the 486 is being dropped is because said, hey, we're changing the minimum instruction set that this has to have. And it now includes stuff that is not present on the 486. So this includes the timestamp counter, and CX8, which don't worry about it. You don't need to know. And so the 46 and some early Pentium 586 don't have that.
It's kind of crazy because they only dropped support for the 386 in 2012. So now it's 13 years later and they're dropping the 486. Keep in mind, there was only like 5 years between those two processors.
So Linus wanted to get rid of 486 3 years ago, and he was talked down. So
honestly, this is a fun fact. Linus wants to get rid of x86 entirely. And the reason why is it's also why ARM is starting to be more attractive to folks, even though it's lower power and it's not as powerful as x86 in general. It has less crap. It has less backwards compatibility stuff. It has less leftovers from all the years.
There's less. If this, then do this. Else if do this. Else if do this. Else if do this. Just nested cruft.
And Torvalds doesn't want to support that anymore. But unfortunately, it is the most prominent desktop CP in the world for now. So, but yeah, it's goodbye 486. I had a 46. I had a 46 SX33. SX was the model that did not have the math coprocessor, and the DX had the math coprocessor. Again, Intel's naming SX stood for no math coprocessor. DX stood for math coprocessor. Why? Fuck if we knew.
I have this vague memory from, say, Slashdot or something at the time that the SX was referred to as sucks.
Yeah, it kind of did. That's why I had one. It was cheap. Mine wasn't only cheap. It was, I believe it was a Cyrix 46, which was one of the clone makers back in the day. They made x86 compatibles, and it was hard soldered to the board. That was one of those.
It was a thing back then, not just in laptops.
Yeah, it was. They did that because it was cheap. It was a cheap way of doing it. But all right, that's the news for this week. Let's get to your questions. Remember, if you've got them, you can send those to requests at radiodeadair.com. I'm going to double check, see if we got anything new, but don't have a lot this week, but we do have some interesting ones. Let's see what we've got.
And we started a little late, so if we don't have, a bunch, it's still okay.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Hi, Nash and Mike. I was thinking of setting up a Home Assistant server after I heard you talk about it, and I keep seeing people on Reddit talk about using Docker. What is that, and is it necessary for Home Assistant, or is there a vanilla method? Thank you, Terry. Okay. Docker is... How to explain this? All right. Usually Home Assistant, the server, is its own operating system all by itself. If you want to run Home Assistant, you either have to make the machine entirely Home Assistant, just that operating system, or you run it as a virtual machine on a different operating system. Docker, Flatpak for servers, kind of digress. Docker, on the other hand, is kind of like a bunch of virtual machines in a way, all next to each other. Plug and play. Just drop in a virtual machine and you're ready to go. Docker can run lots of different things that require their own OSs. They have their own versions. There's Plex for Docker. There's Unraid for Docker, I believe. There is Home Assistant for Docker. It's a set of software that runs all these things together. You don't have to use that. Nextcloud, yeah. You don't have to use or install or set up Docker to do this stuff. In some ways, it is easier. In other ways, it adds a little bit of issues to it. And there's an abstraction layer that gets in the way of the hardware sometimes. So you might run into errors that you don't understand why. Personally, what I do is I run Plex server on my Linux, this box right here. It's got a Plex server on there already. The Plex server software is running. And then I have a virtual machine because the Plex server doesn't require its own OS. You can install that under Linux and it runs. And then I have a virtual machine using Oracle VirtualBox, which is free, running Home Assistant. And even then, there are a little bit of glitches I have to work around because virtual machines don't directly talk to your hardware. They have to go through abstraction. So they aren't really using your USB port. They're kind of using your USB port through the software and it gets a little tricky. But that is probably the simplest way to run Home Assistant is on a virtual machine. You can run that on your own desktop without having set up a different server, or you can set it up on a dedicated server. And virtual machines, the nice thing about it is they'll run on anything. So you can have Linux running a virtual machine, you can have Windows running a virtual machine, you have plenty of options.
Yeah, I mean, technically, probably the easiest way to set up Home Assistant is to buy the Home Assistant Green and plug in an Ethernet cable.
Yeah, but then you can't do other stuff with it.
True. I'm just saying that is there are. I have coworkers who might struggle with plugging in an Ethernet connection.
I mean, even if you ran it on a vanilla Pi or something, you would still be able to do other stuff with it. So you can learn to use Docker. There's a lot of interesting, fun stuff you can do with Docker. I've considered it myself, but on the other hand, it is kind of time consuming. And if you just want to get up and running, I run Home Assistant in a virtual machine, and it's working just fine. Again, I did have to configure it when I added the Zigbee dongle, which is such a weird phrase. It's a USB stick that allows me to run Zigbee protocol devices. When I added that, I did have to put through a USB. I had to go into the configuration and say, hey, this thing exists here. Look at it. But yeah, so you don't have to virtual work up to it. It's all free. It's all, you can play around with it. Your heart's content. All right. Next one is from Alan. Says, hello, Nash and Mike and Cats. Alan is Allan, Alan or Alan? I'm gonna say Alan.
That's
sorry.
Alan.
Here's a weird question. Sorry. Are you Canadian, Alan? Does a higher ambient temperature mean I have to replace thermal paste more often? It's been getting really hot in the Southwest in the last decade, and even indoors sometimes my gaming computer can get up to 80 F even with the AC running, 80 Fahrenheit. I play stuff like Helldivers. I'm using a 7600X with an RTX 4070. Is the extra heat going to mean the thermal paste dries out faster? Well, depends on a lot of things. Number one, it depends on what thermal paste you're using.
Yeah.
Lower quality stuff.
Might go sooner. Even with low quality stuff, it's one of those things where, say you're replacing your thermal paste. How often do you replace thermal paste, Nash?
3 years, maybe.
Okay. So yeah, same. So it might take your thermal paste replacement cycle down from 3 years to 2 years, 6 months, or 2 years, 9 months. It's not really going to have that much. If it was having that much of an effect, the computer itself, the amount of heat the computer itself puts out would be a greater effect.
What has a bigger influence on thermal paste is something called a thermal cycle. It is when your computer goes from turned off, room temperature, to turned on, actually working. And that is a thermal cycle. The thermal paste cools down and it gets more solid. You heat it up and it becomes a little more liquid. That could also actually cause a phenomenon called pump out, where the heat actually squeezes because of going in, hot to cold, hot to cold, hot to cold, kind of squeezes the thermal paste out of the gaps it's supposed to be filling. But that's usually a matter of going off, on, off, on. Unless you are seeing a change in your temperatures, noticeable change, your thermal paste is probably fine.
Yeah.
If you are really concerned about it, I would recommend replacing your thermal paste with something called PTM 7950. It is a phase change material. And I was cleaning it off. I was using it in the server and I had to clean it off to put in the new CPU. This stuff doesn't act like a paste. Instead, it acts more like crayon wax in a weird way, except it's a thermal material. It's made so that when it heats up, it gets melty. And it actually works better the more it heats up and cools down, because it will actually fill the cracks that the two surfaces are supposed to be mating much better the more it heats up and it melts and solidifies. And it's also PTM 7950 is recommended for the long-term situations like laptops, like where you can't get at them very easily. And laptops heat up a lot more than desktops do in a lot of instances. So if you're really concerned about it, you can use PTM 7950 on a desktop system. It's not that expensive. It will last. If you put it on there, it's pretty much, you leave it on there until you're ready to change the CPU out, essentially.
Yeah. And I will say the skill to put it on is a slightly more difficult than thermal paste, but not materially.
You might want to watch a video.
Yeah, watch a tutorial or two.
Yeah, on how to apply it, because it's not a spread and it's not a liquid. It's actually a kind of a plastic sheet, and it's the trick of getting it on there, but also handling it properly, because if you handle it too much, it starts to melt. It's very sensitive to temperature.
Yeah, they actually say stick it in the fridge for several minutes before you go to apply it, not the freezer, the fridge, so that you have a little bit more time to deal with it. And also, so the not foil, the wrap on it can be taken off easier.
Yeah, it's got like this plastic layer. It's on both sides, which makes it a little tricky. I like to use a little craft knife. Let's see if it'll focus. Will you focus on the craft? Focus on it. Focus on it. You can do it. Fucking autofocus sucks. Anyway, I like to use a craft knife to pry up a little bit of the edge on one side, flip it over, pry it up a little on the other side, and that makes it a little bit easier to, you peel off one entirely, you slap it down, and then peeling the other side is a little simpler. But you have to handle it carefully. Again, it melts.
And the other use for your craft knife is, depending on what you're putting on, it may be too big for the spot. Although you can buy it, say, hey, I've got an AMD chip, pre-sized. I mean, they sell it in slabs is the wrong term, but yeah.
It's a matter of if you're really concerned about this, it performs really well. You're not going to lose any performance by using the PTM 7950. It performs very well. It's good use for long term. Oh, thank you for the donation, Mr. Beast Crazy Myths. Thank you. I appreciate the donation. Anyway, the PTM 7950, it performs just as well as regular thermal paste. It's good for longevity. I've used it. It's worth it. So, that might resolve your concerns, but unless you see your temperatures changing, you should be fine. The stuff is made to work in high temperatures. Like the temperature inside your system is way hotter than what's going on in your room. Even if the ambient raises, your CPU is still hotter. So, what's going on here?
What's going on where?
Donation stuff. I don't trust it. Yeah, sus as hell. That's right. Yeah. Created 41 minutes ago. Yeah, let's block this. It's trying to start some shit. Yeah. Goodbye. Yeah, whatever. Oh, blocked and banned. Never mind. Silly shit. Anyway. All right, last one is from David R. Says, hi guys. My external drive seems like it died. It's a Seagate external 4 terabyte. I got it in 2018. I was about to do a system backup when I plugged it in, and the system won't respond. I tried it connected to a friend's laptop, and it won't show up in Explorer there either. I assume the backups I already had on it are gone, and I can't get them back, but I'm also wondering if I can reuse the enclosure instead of having to buy a new one. Would it work with a regular drive, and do I need any special formatting to make it work? Thank you,
Okay,
David R.
So you don't give us a model or anything that on here. So my first assumption is that it is a spinning disk off of USB external drive.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty reasonable because 2018, 4 terabyte SSDs, not terribly common.
Eh.
Or rather, stupid expensive. How's that?
Oh, I mean, 4 terabyte in 2018. It wasn't that expensive.
Okay, so I've run into this kind of thing a lot with older drives. And,
right.
If it is a spinning drive, what it is there's a little tiny interface card between the drive and the USB.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in my experience, that interface card is what has died more often than the drive itself.
Possible. Yeah.
So while you might be able to open the enclosure, depending on how they put that together, some are glued together and slap a new drive in there. One thing I would say is you might expect that it might not work because if that little chiplet thing has gone, that's the thing that's broke. Is my thinking here.
Hard drive enclosures typically, what they do is they take regular off-the-shelf hard drives, just like go in your regular computer. There's no difference in it. There's nothing special in there. And they slap them in that box. And like Mike said, there's a little interface in there that connects to it. It's not, there's even a practice called shucking, which is weird. Sometimes you will notice that the external drives are considerably cheaper than the same size actual drives, off the shelf retail drives.
Yeah.
What people will do is they will buy the external drive, pull it out of the enclosure. It's the same drive, but they got it cheaper. And
sometimes considerably cheaper.
Sometimes considerably cheaper. As for the enclosure itself, like Mike said, yes, those die quite often. They are not very good quality. They are like, I have an external hard drive enclosure that I've been using for backups. It is a nice, robust thing. It's got a little, it looks kind of like a toaster. You plug the hard drive into the top of it and just, it's USB-C. It's 3.2. It does 20 gigabits per second. It's got its own power supply. It's good. It's good bit. And it by itself cost me, what was it, $30-$40 all by itself, which is not a lot, yeah. but still, it was, the enclosures, the volume they're trying to sell, the enclosures they sell those drives in are much cheaper than that even.
Yeah. So, for some brands and some production runs on those brands, like I forget the names of like one of the who does My Passport? I forget that one.
Western Digital.
Okay, Western Digital. So Western Digital has put out a number of different enclosures under the My Passport brand, and some of them are sturdy little enclosures. And I don't mean like sturdy as it could take a bullet for you. I mean sturdy as in if you dropped it off your desk, your drive is still okay. And then others under the Western Digital brand, I've literally dropped the drive this far and the drive died.
Yeah.
And there wasn't one drive. We had 8 of these and they all got dropped, not all at once, just to test them out, but over a period of time, and one drop was enough to kill him. Now that's it. That's where Western Digital drives. Yeah. And it was just a case of, hey, this enclosure is garbage.
Yeah, and
depending on how the enclosure is put together, like I said, most of them are glued together. Some of them are screwed together. So if
some have snaps.
Some have snaps. So often the drive will have a little plastic feet or a little bumper bar on the bottom so it doesn't slide around on the desk. That will be, if it is screwed together, the screws will be usually under that.
Yeah.
And that is how you can take. Now, if it's not screwed together, if it's snapped together or glued together, you probably can't get it apart without damaging that enclosure. I mean, you might be able to do it with a heat gun and a lot of work, but you've got to determine also how much your time is worth.
There's also, I've seen this trick done on the really cheap ones. The hard drives themselves have a control board on them. They have their own circuit board built. That's where you get the SATA port connection. I have seen Western Digital on their super cheap drives actually build the USB connector and whatnot into a control board for hard drive, which means it will only work as USB. You can't shuck those. Those are, so that enclosure is worthless because the enclosure is the drive. It all depends on what you got. I wouldn't worry about trying to that enclosure. Don't try to reuse it. It's not intended for that purpose.
Now, that said, if you can shuck it and check the drive might still be good. You might still have your backup data. You would just have to use a USB to SATA connector and external power.
Yeah.
But that's a $10 kit off of Newegg.
Yeah. So your drive might still be okay. I mean, it's a 4 terabyte drive. It's like $100. Yeah.
Yeah. In my experience, as I said before, it's the little circuit card that translates USB to SATA that goes south much more often than the actual drive.
All right, then. I think that's everything for this week. Yep, sure is. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us for Tech Q&A. We'll be back next Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you have tech questions for me and Mike, send those to requests@radio.air.com, and we will do our best to help you out with them. In the meanwhile, for Mike and myself, thank you so much for hanging out with us and your questions, and we'll see you next time. Good night, folks.